Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, horror fans, cinephiles, Giallo enthusiasts, all that good stuff. We are doing another Giallo adjacent podcast with my good friend Nathan.
Hey, how's it going?
And the format for this episode, we're just going to be doing like a Q&A. There's no specific film, but we will be talking about films and directors and Giallo, all that good stuff. But yeah, we just kind of decided to do a little bit more of an open format for this one. And Nathan, do you have some questions? What is a good question to start with, you think?
So I came up with this fairly randomly the other day, and I thought that this might be interesting, particularly for you. I mean, I have some thoughts, but it's really more a you question. What are some directors in during the period that Giallo was big, which would have been the late 60s to late 70s? Is that correct, or is that giving it too much time?
No, that's totally
Okay.
correct.
What are some directors that you wish had made Giallos but hadn't? And I'm specifically, like, you can go anywhere you want, but I'm kind of more thinking new Hollywood directors. I mean, yeah, well, one of my picks is not a new Hollywood, but I'm just anybody who was around at that time or whatever. What do you think?
There's two directors that immediately jump out, and that would be Sergio Leone and Sergio Corbucci.
Ooh, that would be interesting. Yeah.
Right?
Wait, Corbucci never made a Giallo?
No.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
It feels like because it feels like Django is a Giallo, except they just forget to do that. Like they forget to get to that part of the movie or something. So that's crazy.
And there are a couple of spaghetti westerns that do fall under the blanket of being Giallo films, which is really weird, but they are like, they have a mystery about them, like who is the one going around poisoning the townsfolk, or who is this killer. And I would like to see one of those that's actually done well, but at the same time, in terms of Corbucci and Leone, if they did make a Giallo film, it wouldn't necessarily have to be a spaghetti western Giallo, but as far as being big genre cinema directors of that time in Italian cinema, it always kind of bugged me a little bit when I was like, no Giallo films? No? None from them?
Right.
All right.
Well, and the assumption would be, I mean, there's no way to really know, but one might think that they didn't like those films, or at the very least that they didn't feel that they had anything to contribute to them. I feel like Leone would have enjoyed the movies. I don't know about Corbucci.
Right. I do feel like it's more leaning on the second definition. I mean, I could see Corbucci maybe not liking it, but I feel like they both were like, well, we're both really good at this spaghetti western thing. We've been doing this for a very long time, so it's still profitable. So why not just keep doing it?
Right. No, that makes sense. Yeah. But like Leone worked with I'm blanking, with Argento, right?
Argento, yeah.
Yeah, he was one of the screenwriters on Once Upon a Time in the West, right? So I'm sure that Leone followed Argento's career.
It's funny because apparently Argento was there and he did contribute some story stuff, but ultimately he wasn't as involved as he likes to let on.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's great. I love stuff like that.
Yeah. No, he was there, but he kind of does a thing that I know a lot of people do, where they're like, yeah. So we wrote it together, and it's like
the Cartman thing.
Yeah, it's kind of like, well, I wrote that, and it's like, well, no, I was there too, so we wrote it.
Yeah, I was. I had involvement. There was dude. Okay,
I threw that name out.
Okay, can I do a slight tangent real quick that has nothing to do with your channel?
Sure.
Okay, recently, because I'm into comic books, that's one of my interests. There's been a bit of a kerfuffle recently because for years and years and years, it was understood that the character of Wolverine was created by this writer named Len Wein, however you pronounce it. And apparently, just a few years ago, the editor at the time, Roy Thomas, was like, "Oh yeah, I was one of the creators of Wolverine," and what he meant by that was somebody mailed in a letter to the comic that said, "I want you to create a Canadian character, or no, a character named Wolverine who's short." And he relayed that to Len Wein and said, "Make him a Canadian." And so he now is who, and he's alive still, and he's claiming that he, is a creator of the character. And it's like, no, you're not. Editors like are involved in what the writers do, but they're not. They never get credit. So that's a really weird thing. So I just randomly thought of that right now. But that's funny. So Argento is according to you, according to the sources you're going to, is kind of saying the same thing.
Well, he did have more influence on it, but he was like a story contributor.
Right.
And yeah, and so he kind of exaggerates how much of the final script he actually did. And
okay, I could buy that. I could that makes sense.
And it's like, I really like Argento, but
yeah.
his writing is it's better when someone else is kind of ghostwriting it for him, and he just kind of comes up with the idea. And even with Bird with the Crystal Plumage, like, that was a rewrite. That was a what's his name? Brian Edgar Wallace.
Oh, really? That was a novel of his?
Yeah, is that who it is? The son of Edgar Wallace?
I think so. I know the only one I really know is the first one because I think he worked on King Kong.
Brian Edgar Wallace. The story is called The Screaming Mimi. Let me just confirm that. But yeah, and so it's
but this is one of those things like Argento didn't pay for the rights of the story. He just like did his own take on it.
Oh, Frederick Brown. Excuse me.
Yeah, Wallace, big difference.
That is way off. Let me just confirm that.
Yeah.
Frederick Brown. Yeah, that was my bad. That's totally my bad.
But so basically it's a plagiarism, or is it just like similar?
Well, you know how Italians do plagiarism.
That was what I was gonna say. It's like their whole industry is just based around. I mean, I don't know about, probably not now, but during that period, that was what they did.
Mm-hmm.
There was like, I don't know if you've mentioned this in your videos before. I don't think you have, so stop me if you have. But famously, I think it was Luigi Cozzi said that
the quote.
Did you quote that in one of your videos?
Yep. I put. Yep.
Sorry, it's been a while, and I'm tired.
No. Go ahead and relay the quote.
Well,
people know what we're talking about.
I can only paraphrase it, but basically he said, like, at that time when you went in to talk to the producers of a movie, if you were going to pitch your movie, you had to say what movie it was like. Mm-hmm. And so, virtually the whole industry, if you weren't Fellini or somebody like that, you were making what I would call rip-off exploitation, which is fun. I love rip-off exploitation. One of my favorite movies in that category that I know you know as well is Star Crash. But, at the end of the day, that meant, in a sense, that it would be difficult to really know what was plagiarism and what was just required that you make it like another thing. Mm-hmm. I do think it kind of sounds like it leans a little bit in plagiarism with Crystal Plumage, because it's not like that was a thing or a popular thing, as far as I know, before that movie. Although you're saying it's from a book, like, how big was the book? So that would be the question.
Mm-hmm.
But
I think there was also a film adaptation, but
like an American one.
I think so.
It's so funny if Hitchcock did it or something.
Hitchcock Hitchcock started making films later on that were very close to Giallo films, but
yeah, I was gonna include him, because I was thinking about, and I was like, well, did he kind of make one? And he didn't. In my opinion, he never did. But I think there was some influence there. I've seen Frenzy. I think that's kind of what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's like the last of his last 2 or 3 movies.
Right.
Some people will say they're kind of Giallo films.
I'm sure stylistically.
I can't really speak to that.
the problem with that is he influenced the Giallos, so
Yes.
it's
Yeah.
I don't think that it's necessarily a case of them influencing him back. Maybe they did, but the thing is, Frenzy is. I haven't seen Frenzy since I was like in my early 20s, but Frenzy is not a Giallo in my opinion. It's
Mhm.
more of a takeoff on M.
Mm.
That's what it felt like to me because it was a. You remember the sequences in M where everybody's going crazy because they don't know who the killer is,
Yeah.
and they turn on people and stuff like that. That's basically the whole movie, with scenes of focus on the killer and on a detective.
Mm.
And again, and by the way, the fact that the detective is heavily involved again is another reason why I wouldn't say that movie's a Giallo. We know who the killer is. I'm pretty sure from the first scene. Again, I wouldn't call it a Giallo, but it's like Giallo adjacent. Heyo.
Hey-oh. So I have The Screaming Mimi is a 1958 American film noir directed by Gerd Oswald.
Ooh, oh yeah, you just know that Argento saw that.
What directors are you thinking? Because the other ones that are kind of coming up are like the Italian directors of the time that are more like
Yeah.
like Fellini, Rossellini,
So
De Sica, like all those other guys
it
that were
would be
just like the decades
it
before,
would be so fucking funny if Vittorio De Sica made a Giallo.
right?
And it's like, yeah, the movie's actually about the social conditions in the slums that lead people to want to kill others or something like that, you know? Um, like, yeah, that would be the De Sica Giallo at the end. You feel really bad for the killer. And you're like, I get why he did what he did. Um, no, okay, so one of my picks is a little cheating because he didn't really start really making movies until like the mid, like type of movies we're talking about, the mid 70s. So like the earliest horror film he made was 75. But I'm gonna
Is it an American?
know it's a Canadian.
Oh, okay.
I'm gonna go with
I thought you were gonna say Brian De Palma.
that's an obvious choice or a possible. I'm gonna go with David Cronenberg.
Oh,
I think it would have been really interesting for mid to early 70s David Cronenberg, the guy who made Shivers, The Brood,
uh
these
huh.
type of films, for him to have made a Giallo. This is a guy who obviously he revels in the body, put it like that. He's interested in viscera, and
Right,
these are movies which many of them do have gory scenes. He could have done those scenes really interestingly. Maybe even had a killer who was obsessed with the way he mutilated bodies or something. I mean,
right.
I can just imagine a killer saying things like, "Oh, the flesh, how I love the flesh," stuff like that. That like you could see him writing. I
The
could just
the
see that.
the killer in the fifth chord kind of says weird things like that.
Oh yeah.
You get like audio recordings of them, and they say things just like that.
Does it sound like cruising?
Um,
You made me do that.
no, and it's been a while since I've seen the fifth chord, but I want to say either like the recordings are sent to people or but it's like yeah, you only hear these in the recordings.
Right. No, that makes
But
sense. So
um,
yeah,
when
I,
did when did David Lynch first make a film?
David Lynch, if I'm not mistaken, Eraserhead. I thought it was 77, but I wouldn't be surprised if it was 75. You want to look that up?
Yeah, 77.
Okay, yeah. So Eraserhead took like 5 years to make. He made it at the AFI grounds. So, but I considered David Lynch, and the reason I didn't go with him is because I feel like he's. I think that it would. So because we were talking 60s, 70s, right?
Hmm.
I think the Lynch that would have made a Giallo was the Lynch in the 80s.
Which is fine because there was a little bit of a resurgence in the 80s. Like New York Ripper was 1982.
Oh, well, yeah,
And
that's a good point. That's a good point. I kind of arbitrarily cut it off. So you could throw in Lynch as well. Let's make that a bonus one. Um, the only thing is, basically, it would be Twin Peaks. right?
That's
And
what I was gonna say.
we've got
Is
Twin
that
Peaks, so we're good,
yeah?
really. But
The truth is, Lynch would not make like a standard Giallo by any
no,
means,
no,
and it would probably just come off as sort of like a version of an early film version of Twin Peaks.
not to bring it back to the subject that we discussed last time, but I think it would be kind of like Cruising.
Mm-hmm.
If he did it, where you're like, is this a possession? What's happening here? It would be kind of
Mm-hmm.
like weird. My second director, because I just decided to choose two. The second director I'm going to go with, and it's a new Hollywood director, and this guy is kind of, if someone asks you to just pick a new Hollywood director, he's almost like the one you would just pick. So I wanted to make sure that I thought this was a good one, and I thought about it, and I think it is. I would like to have seen Robert Altman make a Giallo.
Mm.
Now, Robert Altman typically made films that were extremely, I guess you'd call them like reportage. They were really just like real scenes of people talking and shit. And he always, the other thing is, he always liked to do spins on genres. That was like his thing. And he made,
Yeah.
like, he made a detective movie. He made
McCabe and Mrs. Miller.
exactly, made a western. And I think it would have been really interesting to see what he would do with that. Now, I'm not an expert in Altman. I've seen enough of his films. Let's say like 5 or 6. I don't remember all of them, but I maybe he did make a movie like this, but I don't think so. I don't think I've ever heard of that. And so it would be very interesting, I think, to see Altman tackle it, because you just know that he would do something weird with it. He would just he the thing about these movies is oftentimes they're directed by people who are like, I've seen these films, I know how they go, I'm going to make it like this or that. Robert
Mm-hmm.
Altman wouldn't do that. He would just have said, okay, well, how do I conceptualize a movie about a killer whose face I don't see? And so that would have been really, really fun. And then I'm sure the soundtrack would have been great, because Robert Altman, he had these soundtracks that were terrible on their own, but that were wonderful with the film, because they were like meant as part of the film, as like background. And so
Right.
instead of doing jazz or whatever, I'm sure he would have had some really interesting, weird background sounds and stuff. So yeah, so those are my two picks. There's others you could point at,
What about
but yeah,
what about an Italian or a European or Italian director?
if I'm going to look at Italian, see the thing is, I almost went with Elio Petri, but he did make it. He did make a Giallo, didn't he? He made a Quiet Place in the Country, I think it's called.
Yeah, it falls in there, but then it's also not one that's like
It's not
outright.
definitive.
Yeah, exactly.
I get you. I guess. I get this is this. Yeah, I mean, I would have to think about that more thoroughly. I just kind of decided to disregard Italians. I was like, well, if Italians were going to make it, they would have made it. They all had their chance. I I
Yeah.
I like your idea, Leone and Corbucci, because these are guys who understand genre. They understand, like, if you're going to do a type of film, they get the conventions of the film, what's expected, and then at the same time, they get violence. So I think those are great. Those are great choices. Maybe did did Enzo G. Castellari ever make a Giallo? I like him. He made I think it's called, because I always mix up these titles. I think he made the Jaws ripoff, The Last Shark, and that one I really enjoyed. And he also made the original The Inglorious Bastards, spelled correctly.
Yep. And he did the Heroin
The
Busters.
Heroin Busters, which is great. He was a very fun director. If he would have made a fun Giallo, which is a weird concept, but I would like to see that.
I think it's his name comes up in terms of people have worked with him.
Okay, okay. I just came up with a random title. Uh,
Oh,
but
he
it,
also did Street Law.
the Frank O'Neill movie. That's right. That's right. I have the set that has those two movies and a third movie. I forget which one, and I don't know where I put that, but I have that somewhere. The Blue Underground set.
Wow, he's still alive.
Oh, cool. I remember seeing
Um,
interviews with him on some of the DVDs for these things.
so this is someone that I had thought of in the past, but I've mentioned in the video that I do covering a particular film that they kind of gave us the closest thing to a Giallo directed by this next person, and that is, and again, this would never happen. This guy's way too artsy to make a movie like a Giallo,
Mhm.
but Jean-Luc Godard would be
He he
really interesting.
he would. The thing is, yeah, I can see him making a Giallo, but just like Altman, it would be a deconstruction. It would be like a, well, I'm going to do my version of it. His
Right.
his dead, like the dead bodies would just be like red paint on some chick. You know, like that's how he did violence in like every movie that I saw him do violence. Like I see a good amount of his movies. They pretty much always do that in Contempt. In Pierrot Le Fou, he likes to just use red paint as like a, I'm being arty because I don't care about, what it
Mm-hmm.
looks like. But no, I actually think that's a really interesting choice. Yeah, that's a great one because Godard is a cold, cruel guy. Like he's got emotion in his movies, but really he's a cold guy. I think he would actually be really into a movie where women just get murdered, and especially with the relationships he had and everything. I think that would,
Oh,
yeah.
I have one more.
Okay.
Pier Paolo Pasolini.
Oh, he didn't. Well, okay.
No.
So would it just be Sallow though?
Sallo's not a Giallo,
No,
though.
I'm not saying
Not
Sallow.
anyway.
I'm not saying Sallow's a Jello. I know Jello is not a salad. The Jello. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, would it just be stylistically the same thing? Would he have just used it? You know, in fact, that's one of those things. Like if you have to make up a fake Jello, let's say Pasolini directed it, and it's about a fascist killer, right? Like
Right.
that's what he would do, right? Like that's got to be how he would play that. And
It would be
yeah,
very interesting.
it would be. And
It would be very interesting.
I do think it would be like Salo in the sense of the brutality of it. I bet the killer would
Right.
dehumanize his victim before killing them and stuff like that.
Right.
So I could see it being really, really cool, and like really dark and horrific. But I could also, I could also see it being like too focused on minor characters, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's just like a concept I don't know, just pops in my head. Did you ever see that movie he made? Oh, God, I don't remember
I've only seen like 3 of his movies.
Okay, so you didn't see the one where the guy's mom was a prostitute?
No.
Okay, I saw that one a long time ago. I forget what it's called, Maria or something like that. And it's just this guy realizes one day that his mom is a prostitute. He's all embarrassed, and she's like, "Look, this is what I do for a job." And it's just, it's basically a neo-realist movie. I say basically because I'm not sure if it was stylistically exactly that way, but basically that was essentially what it was. So seeing Pasolini making a Giallo, I bet he would like focus on, and this is not necessarily a bad thing, but he could probably maybe get a little much into it. He could probably focus on the people in the lower rungs of society who were getting murdered by this guy.
Mm-hmm. And if you wanted to make the most like hallucinogenic acid Giallo, you would get Jodorowsky.
He was in my list of considereds. I was like considering Jodorowsky, and the joke I was gonna make about that is it's like, oh yeah, we hired Jodorowsky to make a Giallo. Now the movie's on another planet. It's about it's about a balloon. I don't understand.
And the balloon is castrated.
And it's like you see an interview with him, and it's like, and then the killer he take off his head, and then he throw it at the victim. Wow. It's like Jodorowsky's crystal, Bird with the Crystal Plumage or whatever. The new documentary on what could have been.
Freaking A. Speaking of what we were talking about with the film industry and like how, especially in Italy, it was like your movie needed to be 2 other movies that they could wrap their heads around. They say that in the Jodorowsky's Dune documentary that like he went to American producers and he was trying to get the last like $5 million for
Star
the film.
Wars.
Yeah, and they basically were like, okay, well, in order to get a movie made at that time in America, you needed to be able to name two movies that it was like, so they could be like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll latch onto this.
It was because in the 70s, and this is, a lot of people know this, but I'll just recap this real quick. In the late 60s, Hollywood system collapsed because they were making all these really big movies that weren't making money, like Cleopatra. And all these people who ran the companies, a lot of them died because they were really old, or they just sold them. They sold them to corporations. And instead of these companies, like, immediately doing horrible things, they didn't know what they were doing. And they actually
Right.
recognized that. And so instead they said, we'll let the directors do basically whatever they want. And
Mm-hmm.
that's how it went for a while. And then Star Wars came out and they said, we'll do this now. We'll do this every time. So
Right.
that's what he ran into there. If he had been making movies in Hollywood before that, he probably would have had more leeway. They probably would have said you need to have a plot for this movie. But, other than that, it would have been better. It's like David Lynch. It's like David Lynch got into Hollywood because he made The Elephant Man, right?
Mm-hmm.
They forced him to actually make a real movie, but you can see all the Lynchian stuff in that. I'm sure Jodorowsky would have done something like that, but yeah, too late. And it's funny you say that because that explains a lot of Lynch's Dune.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
which I still enjoy, but it's just not,
At the end of the day, it's one of those movies that like the producers took over and
right.
the director's like, all right, I want nothing to do with this. Which, funny, real quick sidetrack. I mentioned this, that's essentially what happened with The Cat o' Nine Tails, Argento's second Giallo film, is that the producers were getting too involved and they
Oh,
were wanting
really?
it to be, yeah, and they wanted it to be like this and they wanted it to be like that. And to a point, Argento didn't even want to really do the movie anymore. So he was actually sabotaging aspects of the film because he didn't want it to do well. But
He just wanted to
I,
hurt those producers.
something like that. But interestingly, I think The Cat o' Nine Tails is actually a really good movie. And so I've said this, that I would, because I've seen the movie that we got, which was the compromise between the producers and the director.
Right.
I would like to see the movie the producers wanted, but then I would also really like to see the movie Argento wanted.
Yeah, it's fun to have, if they're available, multiple cuts of a movie so you can compare and actually say, well, actually, sometimes the producers are right.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's nice to see the difference. There's some movie, I don't know if this is a Giallo or not, but you heard of the film Delirium?
Yeah. Well, I mean, let me see, because there's a lot of movies that
It's
kind
the
of have
director,
delirium.
it's Ruggero Deodato, the guy who made the
Oh,
Holocaust.
1987 or 82 or
I don't
79. There's so
something.
many movies.
I haven't seen
There's
it.
so
I haven't seen it, so I can't comment. But what I heard is that on the DVD that they released a while back, it has that like branching thing where you pick one or two versions of the movie, and instead of them being two separate selections, if you pick the other version, it just connects to new scenes. And
Mm,
um, apparently they're almost two different movies. So
wow.
and that's what I heard anyway. And so I like that's interesting that can happen sometimes. Obviously, the famous one of the famous ones is the Halloween 6 cut. The producers had a cut that was like a cult was behind everything and whatnot.
Yeah, it's so terrible.
Yeah, it was really funny. How I mean, was just get into this randomly because Halloween is sort of vaguely related to Jallos. The Halloween franchise is fucked. It's it's fucked.
Yes.
It has like two good movies in the original set of films. You know,
Yeah, you got to be careful when you're talking about Halloween because you'll run into people who really like the franchise, but
I enjoy it too, but
I've
like
always been a Friday the 13th person,
Friday the
more so.
13th, I enjoy more, even though those films aren't particularly good movies. You just like, well, this is what I expected, and this is what I got.
Right, and that's literally is that they're kind of like Godzilla movies
Oh
back in
yeah,
the day. It's like you're not really asking for high art, but it's like as long as the movie delivers essentially what I'm going into,
yeah,
what I'm expecting, then I'm good. I'm
yeah. Let
happy.
me let me
And
clarify. Like, I actually do. I like the first Halloween. Actually do like Halloween 2. It has I have problems with it, but I do like it. I love Halloween 3.
Halloween 3.
Um, Halloween 4 is honestly
That's where
not.
I. That's where I.
It's pretty good actually. It's not bad. Like I Halloween 4 is basically a remake of the first Halloween, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not great. But what I like about it is the style of it. If I'm not mistaken, it could be 5 I'm thinking of, but I believe 4 is the one where it really has that fall vibe to everything. There's pumpkins and stuff everywhere, so that's really cool. Um, 5 I don't like, 6 I don't like, 7 I don't like, 8 I don't like. I mean, I don't know, stop me. Like I don't like any of
No,
the rest of those movies. I liked the 2018 reboot. I did enjoy that, and
Me too.
I didn't like this next one, Halloween Kills, and I did like Halloween Ends, which a lot of people didn't like. So there's plenty
Right.
of Halloween movies that I like. So don't take me wrong on that score. I'm just saying that the original continuity of films after 4, it's almost like I don't know. It's like the company said this is our shitty, our lowliest property. Don't spend too much time on it.
Right. And we've had conversations before about what they could have done with that trilogy, whether they
Oh
could
yeah,
have just made 2 movies or whether they could have just made one really big movie. Um, because, yeah, Halloween Kills in particular doesn't feel like it needs to be its own movie, especially, and it's like, what, 2.5 hours long or some shit?
Halloween Kills literally feels like it's like a holding pattern
Yeah.
as a film, and
It's way too long, and
way too long.
the whole plot of the mob mentality, that's felt like that was supposed to be one act,
It,
not an entire film.
yes, exactly. It felt like a single scene.
Yeah.
It felt like, and it was so poorly done.
Mm-hmm.
Just like, why would you
Evil
even bother?
dies tonight.
Evil dies tonight. Do you think they just didn't want to have to keep writing new lines? Like I don't get that. But
It's also when it came out. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that kind of came out when people still weren't really going out to theaters.
yeah, Halloween Kills. I'm trying to remember. I think that was 2021. We have to look that up, but I think you're right that it was 2021, and friggin' yeah, you could say that was that time. I don't know what the
Yeah,
box office of the
2021.
movie. I don't know what the box office of the movie is, but whatever it was too much.
Yeah, I ultimately just really don't like that movie. Like, I would, if you were to keep all of them, um, the first reboot, pretty good, like, honestly, really strong. The only things from Kills that I would think to keep as well, I guess you got to keep the opening of how he survives, and then keep maybe the very ending of the movie, and just cut out like literally the middle, like, hour and 40 minutes or whatever it is. But and
You
then
well,
you get
you could have done the surviving thing right at the beginning of Halloween Ends, or you could just not do that. You could just say, "Oh,
just not
well,
do it. Yeah.
yeah, like he's gone, I guess. Oh, he's back." Because who cares, really? Like,
And
yeah,
that would actually be an interesting way to go into Halloween. Is it Halloween Ends? Halloween Dies? What the fuck is the last
Halloween
one called?
Ends. It was Halloween Ends, the last one.
Yeah, that could actually be an interesting way to go into Halloween Ends, is them just automatically thinking he's dead and not being like, well, he killed a bunch of people and escaped into the night. It'd be like, no, well, we thought he died in the fire, but they just never recover the body. But
Yeah,
then,
yeah, exactly. They just go, well, we went through the house, we didn't find him nowhere.
yeah.
Like it's not that hard of a fix.
Mm-hmm.
Friggin' Halloween Ends. I'll defend that movie. A lot of people didn't like that movie. I did. It's true that the ending is tacked on, but it's like it's humorous, so I give it a
Yeah,
pass.
we were saying that the movie felt like if David Lynch had directed a slasher film.
Some of it feels like direct homages to David Lynch. They're
Mm-hmm.
in a small town. The people
You're you're
there.
you're focusing a lot on the quirkiness of the people, and
Yes, which is a David Gordon Green thing. That's his like signature.
last I had heard, they are doing a remake of The Bird with the Crystal Plumage with David Gordon Green. I don't know if he
What?
actually is. Yeah, I
He
don't
was
know if he
also
is still.
at one point he was attached to Suspiria, and
Yeah.
knowing because I haven't seen the remake, but I know you really like it. I'm glad he
It's
didn't end up directing it because there's no way it would be like what it was like.
yeah.
He can't do that. I mean, he just, I'm not trying to be insulting, but the Exorcist movie just, they spent a lot of money on that.
Yeah, I can't really see anything definitively in terms of who is. It seems like the project's kind of up in the air right now. Like, there's no articles recently that are actually talking about what's going on with A Bird with the Crystal Plumage remake.
Projects of that type frequently are when it's like a remake of some other property when there's not like a passion to it. It's just like, well, we
Oh,
own this thing.
wow. So this thing I found on Reddit says Dario Argento has sold the remake rights to his first 3 films.
Because he needed to pay his rent.
he's got one foot in the grave and one foot on a banana peel.
Yeah, but he's got a daughter.
Yeah, and she's not really making any movies anytime soon.
She's not making much of anything anymore.
But yeah, that would be really interesting. I mean, I don't necessarily like, this is what I had said to someone recently, like, I'm always angered when people do remakes because the truth is the majority of people who see the trailer and go see the movie are going to have no idea what a Giallo film is. They're not going to have any idea who Argento is. They're not going to have any idea that this is a remake of an old genre that predates slashers. Like, people go into it just not knowing, and they don't care is the other thing. Like, everybody, for the most part, who saw, I mean, and this doesn't really totally matter, but everybody who saw Django Unchained has no idea that it's taken from, the 1960s
Right.
Django film and all that history. And yeah, I mean, again, it's ultimately, it's not like
Well,
a bad thing, but it's kind of annoying.
There's one person that there's at least a few people that we do know have seen the original Django,
and
it's the Russian interrogators who went after the Moscow attack guys. There is a video circulating where one of them cut off one of their ears and fed it to them.
Oh.
So those guys absolutely know Django.
The other gunmen, they got a bunch of horses to run over his hands.
And they're like, "Do you think we should have some other form of training besides just watch the Django movie?" No, it works. It's fine.
Watch other form of training besides watch Django movie 50 times.
No, we watched Django movie 65 times. That'd be better. Anyway, so the other question I came up with, the other topic or question I came up with is, because I don't really have an answer to this question. I'm not enough into the genre to really have an answer. What is the Giallo that you show someone who has never seen Giallo before?
It kind of depends on the person. It sucks that I can't just have like a straightforward answer. I guess the straightforward answer would be Bird with Crystal Plumage, but I would also add that it really depends on the type of person. Like, who is this person to you? How are they in terms of like a movie person or a horror person, or like, can they watch foreign films like Italian horror films?
Right, like can they watch it without laughing?
Right, and if you find someone that you feel like they're never gonna see another Giallo movie, then maybe show them Deep Red.
Right, because that's like the pinnacle.
Right, and if the person is like really into slasher movies, but not really so much into the whole Giallo thing, I would say maybe the New York Ripper is a good one to show. You don't really have to have seen other ones to enjoy that.
Maybe New York Ripper. Now that I think about it, maybe Torso.
Torso also. Torso might.
Torso
kind of
has a lot of the Italian. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, stuff. So that's an issue. But
the stuff that some people would find silly that's cheap.
My thing about these movies, and it's always been the case, even with spaghetti westerns, because that's how I first got into Italian films. Is there's plenty of stuff that I think is funny and I laugh at, but it's that in combination with stuff that I also take seriously and really like. And so that's a great experience because it's just like two great tastes that taste great together.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so
So,
those are basically your answer. But
well,
really your answer is like, well, it depends on the person.
it kind of depends on the person and like what their sentiments are towards different types of film and everything. Like everybody, this is something I always say. It's like everybody watches movies, everybody listens to music, but some people have more of the what one of our acquaintances would call the basic bitch kind of outlook, where
Right.
it's like they're just watching too many Marvel movies, or they're watching too much Hollywood stuff, or they're not willing to watch a movie that's older than, like, 1973, or they're not willing to watch a movie that's not American or Canadian, or so
Right.
with some people, getting over that hump of Italian genre cinema of the time being kind of cheap or being what it is, some people are going to have a rough going of it, or is this like is this a partner, someone you're seeing, who hasn't seen the genre? Is this a friend? Is this someone that's like really into movies? Is it, what I mean? So kind of depending on the person,
If
I would
you're
say.
let's just say that the person is someone who is a cinephile. It's someone who really loves different genres of movies, but they've never seen Giallo movies before. Which one do you recommend to that person?
mm, Either Blood and Black Lace or Bird with Crystal
Okay,
Plumage.
see, that's interesting there, yeah. Because if they're a student of film, you go, well, maybe Blood and Black Lace.
Yeah, and Blood and Black Lace kind of comes with that whole. You should watch the Bird of the Crystal Plumage too, because if you see those two, those I would say are the prereqs to really kind of explore more. I mean,
Those are kind of the premises from which all the other conclusions of the Giallo films have been taken.
yeah, a lot, the majority of them at
Right.
least. Like the Girl Who Knew Too Much is a good one to watch, but I feel like a lot of people wouldn't like it unless they are. Like most people I know, they didn't start with The Girl Who Knew Too Much. They watched it because they started getting into Giallo films, and they wanted to go back and watch the first one and kind of go and see where the genre went.
Right.
But Blood and Black Lace is the first one that's like, okay, now this is more what we're talking about here. And then the 60s, you got all those other films. Again, like some of them I talked about, I mentioned you don't even have to be watching Giallo films to watch this. Like Libido is good on its own merits, and The Possessed is good on its own merits. Like you don't need to be studying Giallo films
Right.
to watch those and to enjoy those.
Right.
And but yeah, if I had to say, probably The Bird with the Crystal Plumage would be the best pick. Deep Red, I would say, if you don't think the person's ever going to watch anything again, it might be a good one. But it's so, my experience as that being the first one I saw and then going through the genre, it was so difficult. Every film I was comparing to Deep Red, I was
Right.
like, okay, well, the music's not as
So
good.
that's the only
Okay,
problem.
well, yeah. So that's the main issue. But yeah, Bird with the Crystal Plumage, Deep Red maybe, Blood and Black
Huh?
Lace, or
Yeah,
even.
I think we pretty much answered that question.
Now you said you won't answer it, but what would you do if you were gonna?
What's a Jello? I would show them like a piece of trash, let's see here. I'm trying to I'm trying to think. Most of the Jollos I've seen are good, actually good, but I would try to find like a junky Jallo movie, I trying to think something by Lenzi maybe because I mean, I'm not saying he was terrible, but I think that what I would show someone is a less known, like kind of like crappier
The one that
movie.
we.
It's because what I really would want to convey to them is like most of these films are garbage. like not necessarily even just Jallos, but like Italian cinema at that time. It's like I enjoy these movies, but you have to know going in that there's a lot of this is like way below the quality that you're going to be fucking expecting coming from American cinema, even in modern day, which is not particularly high quality. So
You're right.
that's I would probably show somebody.
So sweet, so perverse.
Thank you. Yeah, just give me a movie that's like kind of like exploitative, and that's what
Well,
I would show.
I just remember we both watched that like over Discord, and when we got to the end, we both were kind of like, "Huh, well,
It's yeah,
okay."
yeah. That's probably a good choice because you need to start at a lower level so that the bar can be raised.
Yeah, and again, So Sweet, So Perverse is not even like a bad movie. It's just
Yeah, it's just not.
it
It's just not a
it's
deep red, and so
yeah, and it has a very it's one of those movies that you watch the first time and you're like, "Well, I did not expect the plot to go in all those directions."
right,
And then when you rewatch it, you're like, "Okay, that's right. They're going to be doing this. Oh, that's right. Then like this person's going to die. Oh,
right.
okay. Yeah, right.
But
Right, yeah,
yeah.
right.
So that would be my pick. But again, you kind of picked it. So I
Well,
know,
that
you know.
was
But
I'm trying to think.
the idea of a movie kind of like that, yeah, would be what I would go with.
I feel like I don't remember how many Giallo films you've seen. There was one that you watched that you then were like, "Yeah, I didn't like that." And I'm trying to think what that was.
There's a lot of Jello movies that I probably didn't really like in the end because I have to be in the mood really for a movie like
Right.
that, and it's like I guess I prefer a lot of the American style of these
Oh,
films.
I think it was $5 you didn't like.
$5 is $5 really a Jallo?
Yes.
Okay, let's talk about that in like another podcast because I find that hard to swallow. But
Yeah, $5 was one that you watched on your own. You were like, "Yeah, I did not like that."
the best part of the movie is that piece of music that you like.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's good, and I do like the bit where they keep going to the freezer. But to me, I was just like, "Did you write this script in like a weekend? Like this is preposterous." But whatever. We'll talk about that another time.
Okay. All right. We will wrap this up, and hopefully you found this enjoyable. This was the first of many Q&A type podcasts we will be doing here on Giallo Adjacent. So, yeah, join us next time, and we'll see what we come up with.
Maybe perhaps when we put this out, if people want to put in the comments questions of their own, if they have any interest in that, then we may discuss those in the next one. So just an idea.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, if you have any questions that you would like us to answer in the Q&A segments in the Q&A episodes of the Giallo Adjacent podcast, leave those below. And if we like the question, we'll ponder it and we'll answer it in subsequent episodes.
Right.
All right, y'all. Thank you for listening. If nothing else, see you next time.